Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we have a selection of train stories for your ears. Horrors that happened in or around trains. Certainly a novel topic. I hope you enjoy. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. In New Zealand, we have a lot of walks. And sometimes I like to just drive somewhere and go for a hike in the bush. Normally I just walk to a point and turn back, but tonight I decided to walk the entire track. This specific track goes from a visitor center at the top of a hill, then down a hill is the track which takes you past a large old abandoned railway that was once used to show off glowworms and now is just a rusting wreck. I decided to walk down the track. It was about 4:30 and it was starting to get dark, so I thought I would explore a bit and then walk back to my car. About 200 meters from the main station, there's an old tunnel used by the train. This tunnel has been abandoned coming up 3 years now, so I'm in the tunnel with my little lantern. This tunnel would not have been more than 500 meters long. While I was walking over the sound of my wet, slapping footsteps, I swear I could hear someone following me, breathing on me. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I stop in my tracks and swing around with my lantern. Nothing but a small bat of light from the tunnel opening. So I start to walk again, and the feeling returns, then over my own breath and the slapping of the footsteps. I heard something, not someone, a man with a deep voice. I heard in a dangerous whisper, "Get out." Didn't need to tell me twice. I felt my large frame running through this tunnel, designed for a tiny train, and I heard footsteps behind me. The light of the mouth of the tunnel is getting larger and larger, and I feel the security of daylight wash over me. But then I trip over and fall down on my stomach while still in the tunnel. I feel this presence near me, and I tried to get back up, but my shoulder is killing me, and my legs have decided they don't want to work anymore. Then I felt it. Whatever it was, didn't want me there, and didn't want anyone there. I got up, covered in mud, down my front, into the safety of daylight, walking up the railroad looking like some awful extra on The Walking Dead. I reached the small station and managed to sit myself down on the long defunct station, sitting there trying to stretch my arms out so it won't hurt anymore, then stretch my legs. I looked up and to the left, and standing on the platform as if waiting for a train was this guy, dressed in brown overalls and what looked like a white shirt, looking dirty and disheveled. I looked back down at my foot and turned back to where he was a moment ago, but he was gone. I promise you I'm a big-framed guy and have never run so fast in my life, up the hill, through the thicket of the forest and back to the safety of the car park. I am now sitting in my car, trying to process what the hell just happened. This story happened when I was working the 150-mile line between Nashville and Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was working a local job on the run called the Cowan Pusher, with the mountain grade starting at Cowan and basically going all the way to Chattanooga. It can be a difficult stretch of railroad. I had the third shift on the Cowan Pusher. It was all I can hold, even if I didn't enjoy working nights. We basically just sat in the shop and waited to be called to help heavy tonnage trains get to Sherwood, Tennessee. Now all I can say about Sherwood is picture the hills have eyes with banjos added in. On the night in question it was about 11:50 p.m. when a heavy freight train stopped over at Sherwood and requested our help to get over the other side of the mountain. We climbed on the engines and got on our way. By the time we hit Cowan, we started curving up the foot of the mountain. We had no visibility of any kind, and the only thing that was illuminated was by locomotive light. We had a 30-minute ride ahead of us, along with a 2-mile-long dark tunnel in our paths. As the clock struck midnight, we were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods filled with wolves, rattlesnakes, and a few mountain folk. Most of the mountain folk are nice, but don't let the sun set on your ass in those woods. About 10 minutes later, the north portal of the tunnel was in sight. A bridge hung in the entrance. A bridge hung over the entrance. A branch line that was taking up long ago crossed it, going to another part of the mountains. The bridge is still accessible by ATV. As I looked up, I saw a campfire and people. They all looked to be dressed darkly, maybe even in masks. All I could see was white in the faces. As we started under the bridge, we heard a thud over our heads on the locomotive roof. We proceeded through the dark tunnel and slowed just out of the south portal as the conductor looked out the back door with his flashlight. He saw nothing, so we shrugged our shoulders and proceeded on the last 10 minutes to our waiting train. It was 12:20 a.m., and we coupled on the rear of the train to push it from Sherwood. As the engineer on the head end entered the south portal of the tunnel, he radioed back for me, talking about figures standing over the tunnel entrance. However, no one was there as it came into my sight. As we exited the north portal, I looked to the best of my ability to see on my side of the tracks for whatever we had hit with our roof. I saw what looked like a black cloak fluttering in the wind as we passed, but couldn't really tell. As we entered Cowan, we uncoupled on the fly, and the train continued to Nashville. We cruised on into our parking track and tied our engines down. As we got off, we had the feeling of being watched, but thought nothing of it as we parked our asses in the office chairs. We had no more work for the rest of our shift. We spoke and napped on and off until about 3 a.m., but never shook the feeling of being watched. So we stepped outside, and I put a pinch of my drip in my lip, and my conductor lit a cigarette. As we both chatted with each other, we noticed movement in the brush across the tracks. Now I must remind you all that both my conductor and myself are big country boys who certainly don't scare very easily. We went over to investigate, and we found 3 hooded men in the bushes. With a huge spot of my tobacco, I asked them, "What are you doing here? You understand you're trespassing on railroad property." The lead guy then spoke in a demonic gravelly voice. "We just want what's ours." As he said this, he motioned to the top of the locomotive. We looked to see a young man on the roof at the air horn. The young man was in nothing but underwear, and as we looked at him, he bolted off the roof and climbed off and ran down the tracks. The figures then turned to chase him. The lead guy turned his head back towards us with glowing eyes that we could now see. He hustled. Then he gave chase with his friends. We called the police, and after hours of investigation, they found the man's underwear. No traces of him or the cloaked individuals. We even took them up the mountain. Cops love free train rides. There was nothing. Now on occasion we'll find dead animals by the shop door or locomotive, mutilated. I've even found 1 or 2 at my door at home. We still occasionally see that same fire on the bridge and get the feeling of being watched, but it's all gone by the time we return. There's definitely a cult somewhere on the mountains. My friend enjoys riding the subway while listening to, or rather eavesdropping, on other people's conversations. She says it's better than listening to music, and she gets to hear most crazy gossips and stories. One of these days she was riding the subway to work and overheard 2 girls having a chat. One started saying how she would much rather ride the subway in Sao Paulo, which I should mention is where me and my friend are from, than in other cities such as New York or London. According to this girl, since in those cities the subway is constantly open, late nights and early mornings are not really safe, and the weirdest thing happened to her in the London Tube one night. She was alone in the train going back to her Airbnb after a party when 3 people got inside the same carriage as her. It was 2 guys and a girl, and they were making out hard. The girl was being a total boss between the guys because she was getting all the kissing and rubbing. They all looked a little crazy, walking funny, and you could clearly see that they were on something. After a while, the girl notices the making out lady was staring at her. So she couldn't tell if she was jealous or inviting her to join in. So she tried to avoid eye contact. Some stations pass and a homeless guy enters the same cart. He looked at the girl and the other people decided to sit by her. By then, the girl could feel something was wrong. There was something in the air, she couldn't quite say what. As the next station comes, as soon as the door opens, the homeless guy grabs the girl by the arm and drags her out. It was so fast, they were both already a bit far from the cart when she starts screaming for help. The homeless guy looks at her in surprise and says something along the lines of, "Why are you screaming? Couldn't you see what was going on? Can't you see I saved your life?" That girl, between the 2 men, she wasn't blinking. They were carrying a corpse. Unfortunately, this is where the story ends, because the girl who was telling it to my friend got out on her station. But oh boy, girl from the crazy tube ride, if you're listening, I'd love to know what happened and know if the guys got arrested. My car had just perished, and my brother and I were stranded downtown. It was late around 9:30, and we didn't want to disturb anyone to call for a ride, so we tried to take the train home. We were waiting on the tracks when I gestured with my foot to where my brother needed to go get his ticket. A guy that was roughly 10 yards away from us ran up and said, "You kicking at me?" No, Are you kicking at me?" he interrupted. "No, I was just pointing with my foot. You trying to be a smart ass with me?" "No," I said, looking visibly annoyed. He left and we went to buy our tickets. He started to walk towards the ticket machine, so we walked further down the station. He came up to us after trying to use the machine and said, "Which one of you hexed my card?" We obviously didn't hex his card, so we just started to walk off. He stopped us and said if we didn't believe in hexes, we would by tonight, and told us that the last person he hexed felt like they had spiders crawling out their mouths. When we started ignoring him, he said that he could do more than hex us. He can pull out his firearm when people start to ignore him, so he motioned to his waist by grabbing his belt. He brushed up his shirt too high and we could see there was nothing. We told him that we were leaving and to not follow. He said if we called the cops, he'd get in touch with his people and we would leave in caskets. We made our first train but had to sprint to catch the next one. I had an asthma attack on the train and joked about how it was the foretold hex that he placed on us. So strange man with the imaginary weapons, let's not meet again. I've been with my current boyfriend for 2 years, but have just started living here permanently as of October 18. I live with my boyfriend in an old, somewhat famous train station on the East Coast. It's split into 2 houses basically. We live in the downstairs, the what would have been ticket station and lobby. Our bedroom is the women's waiting room. It was segregated by gender when it was functioning. There's half a staircase that leads upstairs, but we can't go up because half of it fell through the floor when it was abandoned. Ever since we started dating, I've always experienced strange things happening in our house. Around the beginning of our relationship, we were watching TV in the living room. His cat stared up at something, so I followed her gaze and witnessed a floating face staring at me out of what would have been the platform on the stairs. I've seen a woman in a red dress outside our bedroom door that leads outside. I've had the feeling of my arm being pulled and caressed while I was in bed. We've seen the glow of a phantom lantern walking down the train tracks. A white light/orb has played with me, and it would sit in a dark room, and when I would come across it, it kind of did a little dance and zipped away. I've seen an orange aura of a woman walking through our kitchen. There's also been a solid black figure moving in our kitchen, but he has left. My boyfriend lived on a different part of the property before the station was livable, and used to see a small boy running through his apartment. Typical stuff, like footsteps in the upstairs part of the house when the tenant isn't home, and things moving. When I moved in permanently, we think a lot of energy was woken up, as the place became very active. This story happened 4 years ago now. So my school has a sister school in Japan, and we had a foreign exchange program every year. I went last year and it was the best trip I'd ever been on. I stayed with a student and his family near Yokohama, and there was only one bad experience the whole time I was there. We were going to visit Sea Paradise, a theme park in Hakajima, and going to meet up with some friends of mine and his host family. On the train, however, there was a strange man who I assumed was drunk or on some kind of substance. He kept putting his thumb up at me, which was friendly enough, so I did in return, sort of like an, "I'm okay." I expected him to leave me alone after that. However, he kept dancing around the carriage and singing quietly. He almost fell over a few times when the train stopped, which was rather amusing. After this went on about 15 minutes, a massively muscular American guy boarded the train and yelled at the man to leave me alone. He asked if I was alright and told me that there were some creepy guys hanging around that area, and it wasn't the first time he'd seen them. I think that the creepy man assumed I was alone because I was being a relatively small 13-year-old Australian kid and did not look anything like my Japanese host family on the train with me. He probably saw a chance to try and take me or something, as I looked undefended. I'm still not sure what the American man meant by what he said to me, but it sounded like this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I hope the man doesn't return to pry on more children, but somehow I doubt that. I live in Massachusetts, in a populated city, so I mostly rely on public transportation to get to places. This included the subway, and living here nearly all my life, I have many stories regarding the subway, such as a guy sitting next to me and touching himself, a woman punching me in the face, and the story that I'm about to share with you now. Me and most of my friends would rely on public transportation to get ourselves to school. This happened in our sophomore year. Our high school was placed smack dab in the middle of the city and around some colleges. I had a friend who would go home with me every day, and we both used the subway. Living in a populated area, I was aware of the potential creeps and dangerous people. It was around 5 p.m. during the winter time, and it was quickly getting dark. After our club was finished, me and my friend began our journey to the subway station. This included walking through a college campus and many streets. It was usually less than a 15-minute walk to the station, so we would just talk and mind our business. Halfway through our walk, I had a feeling that someone was behind us, which wasn't surprising, since it could have been other students, and this was a heavily populated place. Me and my friend were slow walkers, so I was basically waiting for this person to pass us like the others would. Although I waited for a long time and still felt this person on our tail, when we got to a crosswalk they were still behind us. So quickly and slightly, I turn around and take a peek at them. My heart started beating faster when I glanced at them. At first I thought they were wearing a ski mask, but I was mistaken. They wore a black beanie and a black scarf, tightly wrapped around their mouth and nose. He was about 50 years old or older, and had a dark green windbreaker on, along with baggy black pants. What irked me a little was how close he was to me and my friend, less than 5 feet away, and I was terrified that I was going to accidentally smack him with my JanSport backpack, which I've always had stuffed with textbooks and things. Me and my friend crossed the road, and as we continued to walk I became more and more wary. He was a lot closer to us now than before, and he wore heavy Timberland boots, which would crush and pound against the salt on the snow. As a girl, I've always felt insecure about my body, and I was just terrified for me and my friend, since all this man could see was the back of both of us, most likely oogling us. Note that we're both 14 years old and super passive, so confronting this person was the last thing I wanted to do. I saw my friend would glance at her phone every now and then, and go on it to respond to texts, so I ended up texting her. Man behind us. Creepy. It's been like 10 minutes. She replies, I noticed. I don't know what to do. Since we were on a college campus, there were often large tours given by people and crowds of tourists. We began walking at a faster pace and I heard his footsteps quicken as well. I leaned in and whispered to her, walk through the crowd and take an immediate right on a different path that we'd never take to the station. It just led to a different gate exiting the college, and outside of the gate we'd be about 50 feet away from the subway station. So we did exactly that. Walked through a crowd of about 40 to 50 tourists by a popular statue. And after we were speed walking by this point, I looked behind me to check whether he was still behind us, and fortunately he was not. We then proceeded to walk down the stairs towards the station, still shaken by what happened. We paid to get through the gates and then got onto the platform of the train that would take us home. There was a certain exit I liked to take at the station. I would get off to go home. So we walked further towards the left side of the platform with more benches. We found an empty bench somehow amidst the large crowd on the platform. It was Friday after all, and nearly 6, and I sat on the right and my friend sat on the left. Not 30 seconds after we sat down, I felt a presence standing right next to me at the bench. It was him. I saw the Timberlands. Not only that, he was just facing me, heavy breathing and staring down. I saw his shoes pointing at me and his baggy black pants stuffed within his boots. I was terrified and nudged my friend, and she was on her phone. She was holding her phone but froze and didn't continue to click on anything. Just as we were frozen in our trance, the announcement started to play, stating the train was arriving. We both shot up as the train began to come through, and I took her arm, proceeding to lean her to the right side of the platform and through the crowd. We stood in front of the doors of a train cart along with many others. I looked to my right and there he was, in front of another train door to our right. Each train cart came within 3 pairs of doors that would automatically open and close. We chose the middle door and thought it would be odd that he was kind of on the right door instead of following us in. Then I thought that he would probably isolate himself and follow us off the train cart at our stop. I looked up at the train board to see that another train was going in 2 minutes, and as the train doors opened, people began to spill out. I waited for everyone to shuffle out, and the group at his door had already shuffled out, so he was in the cart already. I still held my friend's arm and made to go into the cart last, standing in front of the doors. There were less people on the train, but all of the seats were taken, and there were 1 to 2 empty per row. I could see him on the right side of the cart staring at us. The train would make a warning noise that would be about 3 beeps, indicating they were about to close. The beeps were half seconds. At the first beep, I instantly yanked me and my friend out the cart and back onto the platform. The doors quickly closed, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The train cart started moving within 5 seconds, But within those 5 seconds, horrifyingly enough, the man sprinted to the closed doors, which had 2 transparent windows, and stared down at me and my friend. We backed up immediately. He still had the beanie and scarf on, but all I could see were his menacing eyes. Then he started banging on the glass, making both of us jump, but it was cut short as the train started leaving. Still looking at him banging on the glass as the train moved in the tunnel, my friend fell to the floor and started crying. There weren't many people on the platform since everyone boarded the train, and I began to console her and tear up as well. We were both young and oblivious to everything. I helped her, and we got the next train and sat down blankly staring out the windows across from us, which showed the dark subway tunnels in motion. Afterwards, we were near our homes and parted ways. We never told anyone about this, although we should have, thinking back on it all. I met up with the same friends a few days ago, and we were all reminded of this event. I'm glad that we're both safe and out of harm's way, but I just felt so stupid knowing that I could have gotten someone's attention since we were near big crowds, or possibly a security guard. So creepy guy who follows 2 underage girls home? Let's not meet. A few years ago when I was 12, I was working this event called Thomas at our local train station. Before work on one of the days, me and 2 of my friends decided to explore and try and see if we could find weird stuff in the museum. Mainly, we liked looking for ghosts, the most famous being the woman in white. Apparently, her life ended when someone pushed her on the tracks when a train was coming, and obviously you can imagine what happened to her. While me and my friend were looking, we come across one train car. We went in, and since it was very dark, I was forced to go first. I was the only boy, and we were walking in the car when I spotted something in the next one, which was a mail car. There was a woman in a large old-timey dress standing there. The unsettling thing was her neck at an unnatural angle. She was turned away from us, and as my friend Emma saw it, she lost it and screamed. As she was screaming, the lady turned, and her mouth unhinged, and we fled. We had one more friend at the lobby, and when we explained what happened, she wanted to take a look. Of course, when we returned, there was nothing. And as we were walking out, I look in the last car, and I think I saw some light. I got the hell out of there. I didn't want to risk it. I grew up in the densest region of the biggest city in South America. It's a dangerous place to the point where I've never met a single adult person who wasn't robbed at least a few times. You know the story? In some places there are a lot of words to describe snow because of how prevalent it is. Well, in Brazil, there are many words to describe a robbery. One particular common type of robbery is called an arrastão, literally a great dragging. It's when a group of robbers target individuals in a much larger crowd. The sudden scare makes those near run away, and when people see others running scared and screaming, they also start running along, dragging the whole crowd in a single direction, hence the name. The robbers use the ensuing chase to flee before the cops are called, so it's usually a very brief event. Usually. Now, back in 2009, when I used to travel by subway and walk for about 10 minutes the rest of the way to college, I studied at night, and class finished at 11:15 p.m, by which time I would take a bus to return to the subway station, because it would be far too dangerous to walk this late at night. The day was November 10th, around 10 p.m. I was in class when I noticed all the lights in the buildings I could see through the window were turned off. Soon after, the lights in my building would go off as well. I didn't know it at the time, but what happened was a huge blackout that affected half of Brazil and the entirety of Paraguay for a while. Power would gradually return, but things would only be normal the next day, at least 8 hours later. The generator kicked in, but our teacher dismissed the class due to the blackout. As I left, I discovered near total darkness outside. Streets were mostly illuminated by the cars on the road, and I went to the crowded bus stop and waited. My bus arrived very late, but eventually I reached the subway, and this is when things start to go wrong. Because of the blackout, the subway was not operational, and there was already a large crowd waiting for it to reopen. The building itself was powered by generators, but no one was allowed past the turnstiles until things got back to normal. This was a very warm Brazilian spring night. There was no ventilation in the building, and the conglomeration caused it to feel even warmer. The result of this is that the crowd was divided in two, one group waiting inside the hot but illuminated building, and the others waiting outside in the cool, dark night. By this point, you can probably already guess what happened. I was in the group that chose to bake instead of stand in the dark, but the larger group was outside. Suddenly, I heard a few screams, and then people started to push and squeeze in. This made the heat nearly unbearable. But soon after the commotion started, it stopped. Everything got quiet and the crowd dispersed a little, and then it happened again. A few screams, everyone starts to push everyone else, sudden quietness, unbearable heat, and the crowd starts dispersing. This kept happening a number of times, and I was scared and confused with no idea what was going on, but I overheard people talking and put the pieces together. I was already familiar with the fact that this region had a lot of beggars by day that turned muggers at night. They usually act alone or in small groups, threatening people with shivs or small weapons, snatching phones from distracted victims and the like. During the blackout, however, they took advantage of the large crowd and practiced the aforementioned arrastral. What made this unusual is the fact the crowd would not disperse because we were waiting for the subway. No one ventured far during a blackout, and no cops would ever arrive, so it kept happening over and over. I'm not sure if they were simply snatching phones, using weapons, or both, but whatever it was, it scared those outside repeatedly. I eventually managed to call my father and asked him to drive me home. I was almost more scared when I had to walk alone the short distance to where he had parked the car than of the whole ordeal. I was lucky to have someone drive me home, because as it turns out the subway would remain closed for a few more hours. I can't imagine having to deal with that situation for long. I still remember seeing an old lady waiting alone on a secluded bus stop in near complete darkness during my drive home. She was probably even more scared than I was that night. It's hard to imagine. I also hope those opportunistic robbers got what they deserved in the end. But knowing Brazil, I highly doubt it. I took an Uber from my school play rehearsal, which ended at 8:30, to the train station. The train came at 9:17, and I decided to just wait there until the train came, because I didn't want to Uber home, then do nothing for 10 minutes, then take another Uber to the train station. My mum couldn't drive me because she was at dinner with my grandma. I'm waiting at the train station, and I was around 15 years old and 5'3". You see, I was taking the train down to my dad's house for the weekend. It was raining, and so I was sitting on the bench under a cover on the platform. I was just listening to music and chilling when there was a man who looked to be in his late 20s to early 30s sitting on the other side of the bench. He had jet black hair which was soaked and messy, and was wearing a red button-up flannel, what looked like Dickies work pants, a pair of high-top yellow Converse, and a poncho. He was mumbling to himself and looked over at me and caught me staring. He looked at me with crazy eyes and then averted his gaze back to his shoes. I was kind of afraid of him, since he could easily overpower me or take me, but I tried to put those thoughts to the back of my mind. Perhaps it was a hint for me to stop looking at him. By this point it was 9 o'clock. A few minutes of me feeling awkward, and the guy increasingly aggressively starts to mumble, so I stand up and move to another bench. I was just about to sit down when I saw a sign that the train was going to be delayed for a further 20 to 30 minutes due to the rain. After seeing that and giving out a big sigh, I opted to walk to a nearby sandwich shop, which was about a minute or so walk away. I got to the sandwich place and ordered my sandwich and sat down. After being almost halfway done with my food, I saw the man who was on the platform walk in. He ordered a salad and sat directly across from me and looked at me. I didn't look back at him, but I felt his eyes on me. It was kind of like that scene in an awful horror movie, where two girls are sitting at a table in a restaurant and a clown is staring down at them. After a minute or so of him staring at me, he decided to eat his salad. I'm not sure why, but then he moved his arm to grab his fork on the table. In panic, I flinched and knocked the AUX cable out of my phone. The music started playing out the speaker and I quickly turned it off. He looked at me and said, "Oh, you like corn?" I was kind of surprised he said something to me. Instead of just staring, I responded with, yeah. I noticed he kept looking me up and down and was about to say something, but then I grabbed my stuff and walked out. He does some sort of annoying groan and I hear him walk behind me. I start to speed walk and I practically burst through the door of the restaurant. "Where are you going?" "The train platform?" "Oh, I can just drive you to where you want to go." "Why are you at the station then?" "What do you mean?" "You literally sat 3 feet away from me on a bench and we made eye contact." "That wasn't me." "Yeah, sure. You still want to ride?" "I'm good, thanks." "Come on, I'll pay for gas and we can spend time together. I mean, what is a girl like you doing here?" "Just leave me alone, dude, I'm fine." "Whatever, dude." I walked up to the platform, sat down on a bench and waited. I didn't see where the man went and was kind of on edge. After a few minutes, the man came up, sat on the opposite side of the bench, and I stood up and started to walk away to another bench. I heard the guy shout something at me, but I'd had enough, turned and walked up to the curb. I called my brother to pick me up and go to my dad's house tomorrow. As the call was ringing, the man walked up behind me, grabbed the phone out my hand, and I ran to grab it, and he dodged me. I heard my brother answer my call and say hi or something like that, and I kicked the guy in his privates, grabbed my phone, and sprinted a few blocks away, telling my brother to collect me now. My brother came and fetched me, and that was the end of it. Although my phone was kind of slimy after the guy grabbed it. I never saw the man again. So guy in a weird purple poncho, with goo on his hands? Let's not meet again. I lived in a really small southern town my entire life, until a few years ago. The biggest change from moving to a major city in the northwest was the transit. I'm used to riding in a car where I have my own privacy and such. So for so long I didn't think people would notice me on the subway. Then one day I had just got done getting dinner with a friend, and we went our separate ways. She went to her dorm right away, and I went to the closest subway station to make the commute. Once I got there, I sat down in my own seat and sat my small bag on my lap, just browsing Instagram or whatever, when I noticed a flash from in front of me. A random guy dressed in scrubs, who looks like a totally upstanding guy, was taking pictures of my cleavage, very apparently. I've never been in this situation before, so I just ignore him. I was more afraid of his reaction if he knew I'd noticed. I'd tried using my hair to cover my exposed skin. Well, I made it to my stop and this person gets off at the same stop. It could have been coincidence, but he followed me all the way out to the restrooms in a corner and decided to wait out there until I came out. I don't know why, but by the time I took, thankfully he was gone. If not, I definitely would have told a worker, but I don't think pictures are a crime, so creepy perverse dude, let's not meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. It certainly was a fun little bunch. If you did, please don't forget to let me know down below. I'd like to extend a huge thank you, as always, to my wonderful patrons for their continued support of this channel. It really does mean a lot. If you would like to access exclusive content that can only be available there, as well as a handful of additional perks, feel free to check it out. It's all there waiting for you if you are so inclined. Oh, train stories. Certainly quite creepy. Haven't taken the train in a while, actually, not since I've moved. But yes, I do remember the days where I used to take the train at night, around midnight, and it could be quite scary. I do have one personal experience. It's not scary per se, but I'd fallen asleep on the train. It was past midnight, I think half midnight, and I woke up and I saw the doors close to my stop. The next stop was a station that I'd never been to before, because I'd never gone further up the line, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll just get off here, and I'll get the train back. But because it was so late, the next train wasn't going to come for half an hour, and my phone nearly had no charge. So I have to go down, come back up, and I wait for half hour in, quite a dark station, just waiting for the train. And although nothing scary did happen, no one came, it was empty the whole time until the half hour after the train arrived. It was just quite creepy and eerie, just being there in the dark, unsure if anything was going to happen. This was in London, in not such a good area, so it would have been believable to have been afraid if a bunch of, rough or dodgy people would have shown up and, caused the solo passenger on the station some trouble. So I'm fortunate that never happened. In any case, feel free to share your own experiences to my email or my Reddit. Both are in the description. But for now, guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.